Kacie, Kacie, thanks so much for joining. And by the way, I don't think a lot of people know how many different accelerators there are, or programs there are to kind of help launch podcasts. But you are highly distinguished in this regard, and I would like to talk about all of them if we could.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jeff, for having me on. And yes, that sounds great. The word of mouth, people just saying, hey, this looks like a thing you might be interested in, or I don't know what this is, but you should apply to it, is pretty much what jump started my creative career. So happy to share.
Oh my gosh, that is the perfect setup to a story, and please continue.
Okay. The name of my company is Could Be Pretty Cool. We're an audio production company that specializes in crafting podcasts about arts and culture. And the way that we chose our name is literally because people all the time, just my friends, colleagues, would casually send an email, send a text, send a DM that said, I just saw this thing. I don't know what it is, but it could be pretty cool. Or, this opportunity could be pretty cool. So why not check it out? And so that sort of spirit of community sharing with creatives, that spirit of, wanting to be, I guess, aspirational, but not necessarily like braggadocious. I was like, yeah, I'm going to name my company Could Be Pretty Cool. So the reason that we really got started in 2019, I think that's right. All the years have blurred recently. That's exactly
Same.
what happened. Yes, absolutely. One of my theater moms here in Atlanta, Rachel May, shout out to Rachel May, sent me a DM on Facebook and said, there is this Spotify podcast workshop for women of color podcasters. Like, I don't know if you do podcasts, but I know you do audio. I'm a theatrical sound designer by trade. And I was like, no, I don't do podcasts, but okay, it's audio. I can fill out this application. I know I probably won't get in, but why not? Fast forward, I fortunately did make it into the program. I was in the second cohort of the Spotify Sound of Podcasting Accelerator. They flew 10 of us from around the country out to Spotify headquarters in New York, and we had a week of rigorous workshops and networking and workshopping our
Mm.
own podcast pilot ideas. Um, After that week, I came back to Atlanta and was just like, oh my goodness, I can do this. I didn't know podcasting was a career prior to now, but I can do this. And that was sort of the catalyst for starting my audio production company. Could Be Pretty Cool.
What do you think you got the most out of from that Spotify workshop?
I would say the thing that I got the most, the podcast community is so welcoming.
Yeah.
I've heard stories about my friends who work in film and television and fashion even, and how hard it was when they got to a new city or wanted to pursue new opportunities to get in. I found with podcasting that you meet another podcaster and it's not, oh, you're my competitor. Who are you? It's like, oh my God, what is your podcast about? Can I come be on yours? You want to be on mine? Want to do an ad swap? Want to do it? And so that was
Accurate.
kind of like, yes, my first, like, whoa, everyone here is so nice and so like interesting. And I would say the second biggest takeaway again was that there was a career path in
Yeah.
podcasting. I knew that it was like a thing people did in their basements talking about baseball cards or something, but I didn't know you can have a creative career in the podcast field. So those were the two biggest things.
I know somebody who makes a half a mil just breaking cards on the internet, and I'm like always just in awe of like, dang, all right, you figured it out. Like there's just so many different. I think that's probably the nature of podcasting. There's so many different avenues. There's so many different lanes for content. We're probably never going to run into the exact same thing or the exact same possible execution. Everybody's bringing a different lens to it, and that was kind of what I was assuming. Is like, I'm like, with your technical expertise, I don't think going to the workshop was going to be like, oh cool, I'm going to learn how to do audio, like audio. But it was just understanding how the industry felt. Take do a little fast forward. Again, we don't have to list years because neither of us are remembering those. But fast forward to the one with Google.
Yeah, so fast forward, I make a podcast that eventually sells to Spotify. I'm doing production work on other people's shows. I'm doing other original stuff, and 2023 happens, and we all know in the podcast and audio field, 2023 was fascinating for our industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like many of us, I started looking into ways to pivot, to kind of figure out, okay, where else can I plug in and hopefully continue to eat food and live indoors. And so I never I never considered myself to be a journalist, right? My podcasts weren't necessarily like interview based or, fact finding based. They're like creative art making, get all my artist friends together. Let's talk about a project we worked on. And so when I first saw the Google News Initiative pre-launch lab accelerator program, I think someone just posted it on LinkedIn. And I said, this seems interesting, but again, almost similar to the Spotify accelerator. I was like, but I don't think I'm actually going to get in this. Like, I'm not a journalist. I don't know anything about journalism.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I just applied, and I applied with the new podcast that I'm actually launching on January 24th. Fingers crossed, we think. Yes, it's happening. Which could be pretty cool news. And it is a journalistic focused podcast about the creative entrepreneurship ecosystem. We're interviewing experts, creative entrepreneurs, we're sourcing data. Really, I guess it's an accidental passion project that I'm taking very seriously. And so, again, through the Google News Initiative Accelerator, it was just another way to be like, oh, this is an avenue, this is a possibility. And so, very grateful for all these opportunities.
Was the what takeaways were different? What takeaways were the same from the Google one versus the Spotify one?
Oh, yes, that's a great question. I think the takeaways from the Google Accelerator that I guess stick out with me the most. Oh my God, I'm being such a bad guest right now. Did my thing just ding? Let me close
It
my.
did, but Kacie, in the span of, and I don't want to derail your good answer here, and hopefully we'll come right back to it. But we have had a dog, we've had an Alexa. Sometimes, if I know that somebody has Alexa in the background, I will intentionally try and trip it off. We've had a snowplow. We've had birds. Case, it's unavoidable, and I love it.
I'm
It just makes this real and relatable. We're
okay,
humans.
good. I should know better. But thank you. I appreciate that grace. Um, so I would say the thing that I took away the most from the Google News Accelerator is that the whole definition of journalism is completely expanding and collapsing and reinventing itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think 20 years ago there wasn't an ecosystem for like somebody to say, I'm going to be a restaurant reviewer, I'm going to review restaurants and post my videos on the internet in the
Yeah.
same sort of like vein as like I'm a food critic for a major newspaper and I'm going to post my reviews in this major newspaper, and that is how you're going to hear about the restaurants you should go to. I think that journalism today is, I mean, it's still based on the fundamentals. You want to build trust, you want to tell stories, you want to be
Mm-hmm.
factual. But I think the title of journalist, like I said, I was like, I'm not a journalist, I can't do this,
Yeah.
is completely changing. And if I I think just the thing I took away from that is if I am staying true to, again, being truthful, being factual, getting interesting interviews, trying to share valuable information for my audience, I am journalistic in nature, and
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have to be like, oh, I don't write for the New York Times.
No, I think journalistic, right, if we're using it in that context, is the effort, right, of building trust, being factual, and putting together a product that is rooted in the fundamentals of what journalism is. But you're very correct in saying, and by the way, I think if you've grown up as a conventional journalist and followed that path, you're probably deeply hating the ambiguity that exists in that field. If you are outside of it and coming in, you're like, oh, cool, the playing field is level. But I think what you're getting at the most here is that the gatekeeping, right, of being a food critic, right, of how that happens and who that gets to be and who is allowed to give you the news. That gatekeeping isn't the same. And so I love that. I can't remember the exact 3 words you used, but one was positive, one was not positive, and one was neutral. And that's basically how we should feel about journalism. It's that it can happen anywhere, and it's really incumbent on the person or the entity themselves to be journalistic.
Yes, absolutely agree. And, to your point about, people sort of coming up in traditional journalism wondering like, oh, what's happening?
Yeah.
I feel like that sort of democratization, which is what you're talking about, is what drew me to podcasts in general. There was a point in time when I wanted to make documentary films, and I was like this silly little like student going to the film festivals like, hey, I have an idea, someone like give me money to make it. And it's like, what, who is this? Versus if I have an idea for a podcast, I can go and like get something down on tape like after this interview. I can put something out there from my phone if I want to. It gives people the opportunity to not have to wait for permission or to wait for a formal structure to put out a thought or a story or an idea. And I think that's really what I love about it, for better or worse, because there's some stuff where it's like, oh God, you're allowed to say that. But for better or worse,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's wonderful.
The good comes with the bad. The other thing too is like from production quality, like there's something that's wonderful about there are no barriers. You have a computer, access to a couple tools, and $100 target mic, you're good to go. But that's dependent on what kind of podcast you're trying to create. I have an intense and deep respect for people who do really layered narrative podcasting, like the audio production, the research that has to go into it. We've got an interview coming out, and I won't spoil it because I think it will probably come out after yours, but we've got one with a podcaster who spent 5 years on something without it coming out. And my brain explodes at the idea of me not being able to come out with something within a couple days. Like I need the instant gratification of like, I have done the thing. Now the thing must go out. I have no confidence in myself. And I love the idea that I think this is so relatable when you say anybody who applies for something, right? It's yeah, but I'm not going to get it. Like I don't think, and the interesting thing is you said that about the Google one, even though you got the Spotify one. I think we just always are people that are like, well, that can't possibly be me. Like, I don't know if that's imposter syndrome, false humility, or what it is, but it's so deeply relatable.
I think in some ways it is rejection PTSD, because, these were 2 major programs that I got into, but we would have to do a whole series on the things that I didn't get into on the program.
A narrative podcast. Yes.
Yeah, like there's so many, grants and accelerators.
That's
and
true.
And so I think in some ways I have sort of built up this, like, I'm not expecting anything, because more times than none, it is a rejection. There, I suppose, is a positive side to, not putting too many eggs in one basket. But to your point, like even sitting here in this interview, I'm like, maybe having a rosier expectation of potential outcomes isn't horrible either. So I'm going to ruminate on that after this interview.
Cool. We've created thought. Like, but no, I get rejection PTSD. I have for a long time in my career, even if I was probably qualified, not gone after something because, and I'm admitting, like I clearly have like more advantages than others as a white male, but I even look at the construct of what I'm going after and go, yeah, but I can't possibly be up for this because I have, pitched this, shot down, pitched this, shot down. And I've had ones where I'm like, this is a no brainer. And they're like, nah, we're good. I'm like, but it's free. And they're like, no, we don't even want it for free. I was like, ooh, ouch, that one hurts.
Yeah, I
So,
think it's definitely when it comes to like pitching your babies, pitching your projects
oh,
where it's like, ugh, I, in truth, to be honest, I feel like going for, the sort of generic grants, going for the generic accelerators, I'm in a much better state there. It's like I'll just go for it, see what
sure.
happens. Pitching my
Yeah.
babies, I think that I need some healing there. I need some heat because I
Mm-hmm.
have projects where I'm like, I don't want anyone to tell me this is stupid, which, if you don't pitch it, you're not going to get any feedback. So I feel that.
It's that emotional investment, right? And so we either respond in one of two ways. We either become more emotionally invested, or we build up walls to try and
Mhm.
creatively like support ourselves and keep ourselves sane. And so I can deeply understand that. I can also relate to how many times people will just send me an email and like, this could be pretty cool. That part is also incredibly relatable. Like once you give people the definition of why you named it could be pretty cool, it makes complete sense because yeah, there's always somebody that's like, oh hey, yeah, check this out.
I need to start getting like a bell and like the secret word and just like I love it when people just organically are like, yeah, that could be pretty cool. I'm like, should I say anything? No, that was great. Thank you for that.
Oh, of course. I mean, but it absolutely makes sense. Like that was, as somebody who's gone through the exercise of naming things, naming a podcast, naming other things, like you can vacillate, ruminate on all these things a ton and go, yeah, is that going to work? Is that not? And I think my best unsolicited advice to the audience is you just have to believe in it. If you believe in the title, I think people will catch on. If you don't believe in the title, you're going to know real quick that I don't. You know, so that part is important.
I think yes, belief in your own work is super important. And, I just heard today, actually, I was at an event before this interview. Someone said something to the effect of like making friends with your nose or something like that. Like, even if you get a no, maybe it's like, oh, well, I mean, if you have time, can you tell me like why? Is it because, you didn't like the content? It's just not like a fit for you right now. And sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, we don't do sci-fi. It's not that this particular sci-fi project you pitch is
Mm,
garbage, but
mm.
that's not what we do. Um, in truth, I have not built up that type of humility to the extent that I would like. It's like if you told me no, I don't ever want to hear from you again. Why'd you do that? But I think it's
Deuces,
really
yes,
yes, I think it's excellent advice. Um,
it
to just
is.
yeah, try to
It
have a
was
conversation.
I as somebody who grew up and still lives in the Midwest, I was thinking about that exercise in execution and going, okay, so then I would then because I identify as Midwestern, but clearly in how I act and do things, I'm not. I will bluntly tell you exactly how I feel, and but generally speaking, if you want to have that conversation in any of the Midwestern states and you ask somebody, well, why is it a no? They're going to be like, oh, no. Oh, don't ask me that question because I don't want to give you a real answer. I do not want to tell you why. I just want to politely say it's a no, and then they'll try and deflect, right? Because they'll be like, "Oh, we don't want to hurt your feelings." I'm like, "No, please." And then it might take 3 or 4 times, but then you'll get the right answer.
That is something else that I'm really fascinated by. The concept of survivorship bias, which is
Hmm.
basically, I forget like the war and the scientists. I didn't look this up beforehand, but you just reminded me of it. Let's go for World War One, maybe. Sorry, you might want to fact check that. There were airplanes that were shot down, and these like researcher scientists were like, okay, we're going to retrieve the planes that were still intact enough for us to like look at them and figure out where the bullet holes are, and then the parts of the planes that have the most bullet holes, that's where we'll reinforce. And so one of the researchers was like, well, wait a second, if these planes were like still intact enough to like come back to us and we can like research them, shouldn't we be more concerned about the planes that like flat out exploded and are in pieces? Like that's what we should research. And so they saw that the wings of the planes had a lot of like bullet holes. So they were like, let's patch that up. And this dude was like, no, the engines of the planes that are like completely shot down are what we should be like looking at. We don't need to reinforce the part that like won and made it back. Let's reinforce the parts that are going to end up like causing destruction. And so that whole concept of being afraid to give or get that like tough tough advice, tough criticism is something that, again, like in this very interview, I'm realizing I need to make friends with. You don't always have to just look to the winners and the survivors and the Forbes top 50 creators. It's like that's what I want to be. Maybe you need to go to the people who told you no and say, tell me what I need
Hmm.
to patch up. Tell me, what I need to tighten up on. And that sucks, but so necessary. Sorry, I'm you getting me philosophical. I need
No,
that cigarette. I'm
it's
ready.
it's so necessary. It's also, by the way, I think this happens like one out of every four times I do an interview where I'm like, that could be a podcast.
Ugh.
It's like I know there's like a humorous ad, and I forgot the company that does it, where there's like a guy and he just keeps going, "Oh, there's a podcast on that," but
Oh yeah,
it's like
totally.
it. It's kind of like the premise of like Nicole Byers, "Why won't you date me?" But it's it's like, why won't you take my pitch? Why won't you hire me? Yeah,
Yes, put that out. Yes.
yes. But
I can't do anything else. Do it. Yes.
also, no, I was gonna say the same thing. No, this one goes out to the world. Go, it is necessary, it is needed. You take it, world. Um, Shoot your shot. But I think you just, with that example, you just gave people a 2 minute preview of your pod, didn't you?
I hope so. I hope so.
Well done.
Yes, we're definitely looking to interview creators, researchers, academics in the entrepreneurship and art space to talk about, again, not just the wins. We love the wins. We're a culture who we love the wins. We love a good hero story. But to talk about the businesses that didn't take off, to talk about the, 20 years of working the 9 to 5 while they built their creative career. And then they sort of were able to focus on it more
Hmm.
at some point. I think so much of what we hear about with like the creator economy now, it's very,
Yeah.
sexy, and it's the TikTokers with the 50 million followers and the brand deal. But the creators who are selling t-shirts out of, a co-working space, or they are retirees who, after their kids have left the house, now they're finally going back to their embroidery work. That's who we really want to talk to and figure out, how do you sustain a creative career with all of
Hmm.
the variables of life. So yeah, that's could be pretty cool news.
It's the 99.5% of the other people who are trying to make it, and it's passion project, side hustle, somewhere in variance, right? That's in every field, right? If we talk about actors or advertisers or anyone or people who aspire to be in the C-suite of companies, it's a select few that get there. It's a lot more people who are aspirationally attempting. The other thing, but with that specific example with the planes that you were giving, I just love an example that's like, okay, so you're taking me on a journey. I do not know where it is going, but I know that you are actually going to land the plane, pun intended.
First of all, love a good pun, and thank you for trusting that that was going to happen because it doesn't always. So yes.
But that's the part where, like, to get really deep and inside on podcasts, right? That was one of the conversations we had before we ever started this. And it's not like people who are listening to a podcast want to hear you talk about the podcast within the podcast, but I think there is some value when our podcast is for like the creator community, and yours is too, that when we were thinking about this, we didn't want to just have fluffy conversations with like everybody who's made it. I mean, you know, that exists. We definitely we do have conversations, and we have awards, and we highlight great work. But we also wanted to really lean into like actual takeaways, things that you could learn from people. Success, failure. Did you navigate things a different way? Did you deal with something uncomfortable? Recognizing bias, recognizing a lot of things that also exist in these fields, and not just saying, "Oh, well, you know, advice is universal. It doesn't matter who it's applied to; it will all work out the same." You know, those were a lot of the things that we were intentionally trying to think about when we were putting this together, because I just think um, the joke is always the world doesn't need another podcast. The world always needs another podcast. It just needs a different perspective, and it needs something additive, not just similar.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's, the world doesn't need another podcast. The world doesn't need another, YouTube series. The world doesn't need another e-newsletter or blog, but folks are out here
Mm-hmm.
even if they don't want to use those vessels to make money, they have followers, they have audiences, they have
Yeah.
people that they have connected with whatever it is they're saying, and they can use their platforms for hopefully good, but to build communities and to connect people. And so yes, I love the intentionality of what you all are doing. And I also, I mean, just want to encourage people, if you're thinking like, ugh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to start a newsletter or a blog or a podcast, like, your perspective is it. Like, if you don't put it out there, it's not going to exist. And so that in
Absolutely.
and of itself is like important enough for you to do whatever you want to do. It may not make $1 million, but
Yep. Yep.
it's necessary.
I think there's a realism in that advice, right? Like you start with, okay, if you're solely thinking about this as a monetary vehicle, you are going to hit a lot of barriers. Like you personally, if you don't have a big audience yet, or you have some things that you have to overcome, you're probably not going to be the person who sells the most Casper mattresses. And that is okay,
Facts.
because creating content isn't solely a monetary venture. It can absolutely be a resume builder, a chance for thought leadership, a chance to make connections. It is so much more than just cool. I get X amount of listeners, and then I sell a Brooklinen code. I'm just gonna. I think for the rest of the podcast, Kacie, I'm just gonna start naming traditional podcast advertisers just out of fun. See
Hmm.
if I can
Hmm.
see how many I can get. Maybe we'll have like a. I wish you had the bell, or some kind of sounder we can do, but we'll we'll figure it out. But I think that also is the very changing, shifting nature of advertising, right? If people aren't advertising as much on TV because they want to do stuff that's targeted, right? Then they evolved and they went to podcasts. Now they're also starting to think like, yeah, it's probably better though if I like serve it to you in Instagram when you're in bed and you're like, oh, I guess I could buy this at 11:30. But there are a lot of different, this there will be a constant shifting nature of how podcasts get monetized and funded and how that works. And so, the old model will still, like the old programmatic or programmatic model of, here's our podcast. Sign up for Blue Apron. There's the third one. There will be those options, and those still will be valuable and available. But I think there's a time now to you take a positive or a negative in the shift in 2023 in podcasts, and you start to think of, okay, but if not that, there still are audiences, there still are reasons to work with a podcast, and now we can reinvent both how we use a podcast to engage with people, but also how you monetize them.
And to your point, I'd love to go back to you said, podcast as a potential resume builder. For the
Mm-hmm.
first time, I'm like, always filling out grants, always filling out,
Mm-hmm.
applications. For the first time, I saw a grant that one of the requirements was send us a video or audio of you giving a presentation. I've never seen that
Podcast.
before. I've never seen that
Yes.
before. I've seen job applications now who are like,
Mm-hmm.
submit your resume. It can be doc, PDF, video, or audio.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before. And so, even for someone who isn't necessarily looking to make a full time creative career or to necessarily solely monetize on their creative work, using some sort of media as a way to share about yourself, to share about your expertise, share a little bit more about your personality than your cover letter could also
Ooh.
potentially help you in your 9 to 5 grind, which I think is going to be very fascinating in the next couple of years, especially with these Gen Z kids coming up. Like, we might have emoji
Mm-hmm.
podcast resume only. I don't know, but it's really interesting to see.
Kacie, I just did an interview with someone who's creating a podcast where every time you listen to it, it could be different because they're A Bing each episode. So it will never be the same again. Like there's so much innovation. But when you were talking to me, like permission to go on a 30-second tangent.
Granted.
Okay. When you were talking to me about this is something that I think about a lot when it comes to algorithms and applying to things online. My first advice, if you're applying to a job online, don't. Because it's very hard to express who you are, and what your value is in an algorithm where 750 people have also applied. Yes, there is a button on LinkedIn that says easy apply. It also means that everybody else thought easy apply. And so what happens is now your persona, just based on Shirley data, is going to have to somehow get through all of the different mechanisms that are designed to scrape that data to make sure we get down to a manageable 20 that we can actually talk to. All of that being said, usually how somebody gets a job is that they know somebody or they can showcase to somebody what they are. And so the way to bypass the really flawed system of I'm going to send you said cover letter and I was like permission to go on a tangent because the cover letter and the resume usually just isn't enough. So the idea that you can send like proactively, you identify something you want and you send someone a really solid 60 seconds about exactly who you are, what you do, what your relationships are, what you can bring to the table. That is so much more powerful than dear blah blah blah. I am applying for this in the hopes that yeah, like, and I know Gen Z is going to take that and run with it. Then I have to think about like, is the HR person going to want to watch a bunch of videos?
This is true also. I mean, this sounds like just like almost a continuation of like I'm a millennial coming up. We were the
Yeah.
first ones to get the warning of like, watch what you're posting on social media. Like, don't post anything, that's not professional on your social media. You never know who's going to see it. And now these, cats are like, how many followers do you have on Instagram? How many followers do
Mm-hmm.
you have on TikTok as a,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
asset to applying to positions? And so
Yes.
I'm excited. I think I'm still at a point where I'm excited. The robots are a little scary, and everything you said about the algorithms and
Just
the
some of them.
robot, some of them are scary.
Yeah.
But I think that it's going to present so many opportunities for creative people to be like, what? I know the robot is not going to find me with my
Uh-huh.
resume. can I do something to connect with the recruiter where they can see this cool concert I put on and do, like, I think it's going to require some really creative minded people to push the hiring and recruiting process and a bunch of stuff in general. So it's exciting, I think.
Well, and I think you're getting at it too. There is a first mover advantage in, again, everything adapts, right? So podcasts are novel, they get a lot of advertising, things change. The same thing can be true in this example of, are you using your content to try and, you as a resume builder, the first few people who, use that, it will get seen. And then the second that starts to be the norm and that gets flooded, then there will be another way to filter that so that somebody can't, because nobody's going to want to watch 800. Like, I would love if somebody would build an HR app where it was like TikTok and they were like, cool, it serves me up. Cool. All right, it serves me up. That's great. But that it probably wouldn't be the process immediately. So they would have to be like, okay, now I must go click on this and go through this. And then I have to go find the MPEG. And then this is going to be a whole process. Um, so, but there is absolutely, I think this is possibly true. Check my hypothesis on this, but generally speaking, if you can be the first to do something, that definitely bore out with social media. Because as a person, by the way, I am a PR person first and an evangelist second. But as a PR person, it was definitely rattled home to me as like, hey, Jeff, you can't be extremely online. It's probably a bad idea to throw a lot of thoughts, opinions, and cats on the internet. And I was like, I'm going to zig and I think it'll be okay. And it did. It was okay.
That was so wise of you. I was like the scaredy cat.
Reckless
I'm like,
too, but
okay. Yeah, like I didn't join IG until like fairly recently compared to like our peers. And, I still haven't done the TikTok. The TikTok. I'm like such a boomer. But no, to your
the
point, like
TikTok,
the tick that the kids are on with the
the
videos,
ticking and the talking, yes.
all of that. But I think you may have potentially just given the universe another gem with your HR TikTok esque hiring software. So
I'm just
congratulations.
trying to give people $1 million ideas and not take credit, so I'm happy with that. I'll save a few for myself. Yeah. No, but that is accurate. Like, yeah, I laugh at like being. I mean, but it is tough, right? There's just so many industries that's always going to be that is the feedback even today, right? It's like, well, why would you want to do this on TikTok, or why would you want to? There's a commonality in the people that I've talked to on this podcast, whether they've been wealth advisors, people who've worked in real estate. Like Winnie's son as a wealth advisor, or Ryan Serhant as a real estate person, like talking to them, and they're like, yeah, if I didn't do social, I'm not here. There's an absolute benefit to being able to demonstrate the skill, showcase audience. You're right. Yeah. I mean, how you hit the nail on the head. Like, how many followers do you have, right? So content can be a lot of different things. I would advise people to not be as reckless as I was early in my career, because at one point, Piers Morgan said something bad about Lamar Odom, and I definitely called him a complete piece of on the old Twitters. And you can definitely find that tweet still, and I stand by it.
Okay.
In that moment, not saying that just for that specific comment he made on Lamar Odom and wishing him dead, I thought, yeah, but we are not a reflection of only one tweet, so maybe he has changed and he has become different. But just to say that, try and find a balance between being visible and reckless.
That makes
That's my
sense. And yeah, I think where I'm trying to become more comfortable, it's like what happens if like all of social disappears tomorrow, right? And so
yeah.
I've been like trying to
Ooh.
actually like socialize more and like go to the networking events and in-person things as, safety allows, because that's also a
Hmm.
fascinating space to navigate at the moment. But
Yes.
yeah, I'm really just now starting to learn the importance of, even, after you're tired after a day of work, going to the dang podcast meetup and meeting
Something.
the other people, is just like,
Yes.
oh yeah, we humans need to meet people and build relationships in order to thrive. This is wild.
I've jokingly said a lot of behind the scenes, it's reminding people that I'm alive because I just, I don't live in New York or LA. I live in Michigan. So it's one of those
Hey,
things where,
Michigan.
yeah, but it's like, I want to make sure that that I have a presence that people know, and that I stay engaged with people. And yes, you don't, by the way, for your own mental well-being and mental health, you don't have to travel everywhere. You don't have to go to every meetup. It's just kind of building solid relationships and maintaining those that are most important. Um, Kacie, are you ready for Keep It Short? I ask 3 questions. They're short questions, but your answers do not have to be.
Okay, I was gonna say, do my answers have to be short? But I'll try to keep it succinct. But yes, yes, I'm ready.
Oh no,
Already,
it's
I'm
it
feeling, I'm
no, it
feeling already.
I just well, one, it's on brand for us, but also two, it means that I don't have to ask really long questions. Um thing you want to or thing you want to accomplish most with could be pretty cool news.
I want to help someone who thought that they could not put out a creative idea or creative project find the resources to actually do it.
Love that. Okay, that was super fast and super clear. I love it. All right, one down. Question 2. Um moment you were least confident in podcasting.
I was least confident in podcasting the first year. I hope this isn't a hot take. The first year I started submitting to awards.
Yeah.
I I won't name all of them. I love all of y'all, but I think that was the year that was the stack of rejections where I was like, I am not good at this. So
It
I
comes
would
full,
say,
yeah.
mhm.
Comes full circle, but I can relate to it. I have gotten some. I have missed most, and um, it's almost like It's a different feeling, right? Because there's one letting me do my idea or giving me the resources to do my idea, right? Those, to bring it full circle, right? Those creative passion projects that we feel deeply about, and then once you've done the thing, right? It's okay. Now I'm seeking outside validation,
Tell me
and
it's
the
good.
tell me it's good, right? But the thing is that like that's that's open to one. It's open to interpretation. Two, it's timing because you don't know who else is submitting. You don't know what else is out there, and you don't. I mean, that can be. I've learned with a depth of perception as an elder millennial that it's not always about me. It might feel like it's about me,
Mhm.
but it's not. Sometimes it is, but but it's not always about you. And so, not to be discouraged, and also as a podcast inside of an awards program, please continue to do that because even just being nominated or being involved allows your work to be seen by a lot of people. Like think about it internally with the Shorty Awards. We have a ton of judges. I see a ton of things as a judge. I see a ton of things, and then I go, "Oh, I can't believe the ad council did that," or "I can't believe this place did that. This is amazing stuff. I want to reach out and talk to that person." So there's always there's a value even if you don't win, and it's also feedback, good or bad. Like we talked about again, it's like
Mhm.
being
Oh, yeah.
uncomfortable of leaning into what those no's are, and then we should ask, "Hey, why was it a no?"
Look at what you did. Yes.
Ah.
Connect the dots. Yes.
Well, if this had been episode 3, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But we're 40 some in, so I'm doing much better now. Um, we grow in confidence no matter what we do if we do it long
That's how
enough.
it works.
Um,
Consistency.
Question three. Kacie, what other than asking people about no's, what's the most uncomfortable thing you want to lean into, whether it's personal or with the podcast?
Oh, I was just thinking about this today. Maximalism in my professional career. Raising my hand, volunteering to go first, um, putting my name in the hat for the thing, figuring out how to go in front of the people to pitch, tapping the person on the shoulder and saying, "Excuse me, can I speak to you now?" Yeah, I think I've been doing the polite thing for a really long time, waiting for my
Mm,
turn, waiting for someone to see me and go, "You, come here." No, I think 2024 is going to be the year of maximalism for Could Be Pretty Cool. We're going to be in your face all the time, hopefully in a good way. But I mean, why not? Like, why not? So,
I
yeah.
I absolutely love that. And for all the other elder millennials or people older listening to this podcast, it reminds me of MTV when Real World was still a thing. And it was when people start being polite and start getting real.
There it is. There it is.
Kacie, thank you so much for joining. I cannot wait to check out Could Be Pretty Cool News.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. This was great.